is my review of Sonic X. Okay, so this episode actually starts a tournament arc in Sonic X, and long story short, the purpose of this arc is to actually figure out where Dr. Eggman is hiding and lure him out of hiding so they can actually get him to try and come after the Chaos Emerald and try to win. So yeah, the idea is to try and kind of trick Eggman into participating in the tournament so he'll get arrested. And it sort of works technically. I'll get to that in a minute, but in any case, it starts off with Deco and Boko helping Dr. Eggman work on his latest project. And Eggman quickly realizes that he's running out of the materials and needs to actually finish the project. I don't know what he's working on, but it looks to be some sort of ship. And so he throws a list of things that he needs at Deco and Boko and tells them to go get them and to make it snappy. And they leave to go do that. Meanwhile, Vanilla and Cream are actually working on making flower necklaces for one another when Emerald walks up with a bouquet of flowers and hands it to Cream, and Cream is happy to receive the gift from Emerald and thanks him for the gift, and Emerald just kind of shrugs. So something I haven't talked about up to this point is that in the actual games, Emerald speaks. He actually has fully recorded lines and stuff like that he uses in the games, but here, not so much. He doesn't speak in the Sonic X continuity. I'm not entirely sure why that was a decision, but he doesn't speak at all. It's very interesting and weird. So, and it makes sense, and it doesn't really make sense for the anime to not have a voice for him. But as a trade-off for that, they made him highly expressive and gave him a lot of body language and expressive movements to actually showcase that yes, he does indeed have emotions and does indeed know how to represent himself. So. It is an interesting change to be sure, and it's something I haven't brought up yet. But in case Amy sees this whole exchange and remarks that she feels that it feels kind of romantic and that she wishes Sonic would give her flowers like that. But then her daydreaming is interrupted by a mosquito, and she pulls out her hammer to try and kill it. At which point Mr. Tanaka shows up and tells her to knock it off, pointing out that she would have very likely broken a window if she hadn't been careful. And Amy apologizes, pointing out that it doesn't seem like she gets anything she wants, especially Sonic. At which point Mr. Tanaka tells Ella to make some pie for Amy, and tells her that she should cheer up because he puts it as a metaphor, but the way he puts it is that even when it's cloudy, eventually a light will shine through a window, which is basically saying that eventually there will be a silver lining, and eventually a bright time will eventually come. And so Amy thanks Mr. Tanaka for helping her figure out how to actually get over Sonic, and that she won't think about it for the time being, and eventually she will find a way to get Sonic to like her. But as she bends back to eat a piece of pie, she actually sees Sonic race by the window, and she's curious as to where he's going. And as it turns out, and as I've explained, it's actually because the president actually asked for him personally to help participate in a tournament. It starts off with Sofia Garcia. She's actually making an entire press release thing about the tournament, about how it's a plan to actually catch Dr. Eggman, and explains that the president has actually recruited Sonic, Rouge, and Knuckles to actually help be participators in the tournament, pointing out that they'll actually be able to catch Dr. Eggman with their assistance. And then states that she actually has an exclusive interview for them and that she's actually going to interview them to figure out their thoughts on the tournament. But when she walks into the room with her cameraman, she finds out that they seem to be less than enthused, and eventually the president has to break them up and stop the broadcast, pointing out that clearly something is wrong, and that they definitely need to figure out why they're so against participating in the tournament. And Sonic just kind of tells the president straight up what his concerns are. He's concerned that the actual tournament won't work and that Dr. Eggman might not show up. And Knuckles is also a little bit hesitant as well, pointing out that he's not really that he doesn't really want to fight, pointing out that he feels it's a little bit pointless. But Rouge states that she'll be more than happy to participate in the tournament for the right price. At which point the president realizes that he can actually sweeten the deal by offering up the fact that he can use a Chaos Emerald as the grand prize, and that's actually what he's going to give the winner of the tournament. So, which causes Rouge to be on board. And Sonic, but Knuckles is still a little bit hesitant because he points out, he doesn't really feel like it's worth participating for one lousy Chaos Emerald. And pointing out that and while yes, the Chaos Emeralds are rare, the fact that there's only one, he doesn't feel like that's a sweet enough pot for him to actually join up. But effectively, but through a combined effort of Rouge, Topaz, the president, and Sofia Garcia, they eventually guilt trip Knuckles into actually participating in the tournament, and kind of playing into his ego, and it works. And Sonic and Rouge even remarked that was a little bit too easy. But in case once Knuckles is on board, the president then pulls Christina Cooper, who is his aide and someone who I actually haven't bothered to learn the name of up until now, but I'm gonna put her here because it's taken so long for me to actually figure out what her name is. But in any case, he then pulls Christina Cooper aside and asks her if they actually do have a Chaos Emerald, and Christina responds that they do. So it's implied here that the president didn't actually check to see if he had a Chaos Emerald first before offering it as a grand prize, which is kind of a bad thing if you're trying to conduct a tournament, but I'll let it slide because it's a cartoon or anime, but you get the point. But in any case, with that, the president then proceeds to run a massive commercial for the tournament, advertising it to the citizens of Station Square, stating that if they are more than willing to actually participate, that if they are more than able to participate, then they should absolutely do so. And also Sofia Garcia helps out as well, pointing out that she has a series of telemarketers standing aside to actually collect the calls for people who want to join the tournament. But when the infomercial goes to commercial, she points out that her credibility as a news person is probably shot because she's running an infomercial. And the camera guys kind of just shrug. But in case Chris, his family, and all of Sonic's friends are sitting around the television and just seeing this entire thing unfold. And Chris points out that he feels it's a little bit dubious of an idea. But Tails remarks that he actually does feel like he wants to actually participate in the tournament. Although Chris asks why, pointing out that they just saw the commercial, but Tails points out that he should know as well as anybody that they can't buy everything that they see on TV. And also several of the other characters voiced their opinion on actually joining the tournament, but as it turns out, things kind of go a little bit overboard when Chris suddenly gets a call from Nelson on the phone, and while we don't hear Nelson's side of the conversation, long story short, he signs up everybody who lives in the house because he thinks it would be fun for them all to participate in the tournament, and he even signs up himself. So yeah, it's a very funny thing. And then Nelson hangs up before Chris can offer a rebuttal. So yeah, Chris and all of his friends wind up participating in the tournament because they really have no choice. But in any case, they then proceed to get prepared for the tournament. And it's around this time where Dr. Eggman notices that Deco and Boko still aren't back yet, and also on top of that, he accidentally bangs his thumb with a hammer. So he becomes a little bit annoyed that they're not home yet, and asks Bokun to go looking for them, pointing out that they need to go find them. But eventually Bokun gets distracted as well, and Eggman leaves to go find Deco and Boko himself. I'll get to that in a minute, but and I'll get into a minute why that's a thing, but I will get into it nonetheless. So it starts off with the tournament, with everybody having signed up, and all the tournament brackets have finally been decided. And interestingly enough, the first opponent in the first participant in the tournament is actually the president himself. As it turns out, back in the day, the president was actually a really good boxer. And while by his own admission, he has actually put on a couple pounds. He does admit that he's still very much in good enough shape to actually win a boxing match. Unfortunately, his first opponent winds up being a character known mysteriously as the Black Knight, which, as his name implies, is a guy completely dressed up in knight armor, and the president quickly realizes that he's in over his head because obviously his punches don't do anything. The Black Knight is decked in full body armor and isn't able to actually be hurt by the president. And eventually Christina quite literally throws in the towel, and the president kind of complains a little bit that he had to lead the tournament, but the Black Knight winds up winning that match. The next tournament match is actually against Hawk. If you guys remember him back from the one episode he was in with Knuckles, and Tails. And Hawk is shown to be a pretty capable fighter. As it turns out, Hawk has some pretty impressive rapid movement attacks. Which Tails is easily able to block with his tails. But eventually he makes the mistake of grabbing Tails' tails, and Tails spins him around in a circle and throws him out of the arena, which causes him to become sick. And then also the next tournament match is against Danny and Chris, but Danny quickly notices that Chris doesn't seem to be up for it, since Chris doesn't really want to get hurt and doesn't want to hurt anybody else in return. And Danny points out that they don't actually need to fight, saying that he'll try to stay as far away from Chris as possible. But then Chris remarks that that's exactly what he was counting on, and it's revealed that entire thing was a facade. And then he proceeds to pin Danny down and win his match. And it's kind of fun, and it is kind of funny. And I'll get to this in a minute. But Chris doesn't really feel very good about this, and he eventually does point it out later in the episode. I'll get to that when I get to it. But the next match is actually against Chuck, who is actually dressed up in a warm-up blanket, and reveals that he was actually a pretty good wrestler back in the day, and sure enough, he takes out the warm-up blanket to reveal that he's actually wearing a unitard. And he proceeds to go into his warm-ups, but he winds up spraying himself and giving himself arthritis, and he winds up being carted off to the hospital. And as it turns out, the reason that was, or at least implied to be, is because his opponent was Lucky, who, as we've established, is a robot designed to exude pure luck. And it's implied that Lucky actually won by basically doing nothing. He's effectively, you know that meme of that Mario Party meme where Luigi wins by doing absolutely nothing? That's effectively Lucky in this episode. And I'll get to that in a minute. But in any case, it's then revealed that Deco and Boko, the reason they aren't back with Eggman's groceries yet, is because they're actually participating in the tournament. After seeing Lucky win the match, they realize that Lucky truly is Lucky, and then they realize that their matches are coming up, but they don't realize that they're each other's opponents. But they do start wrestling each other, but are eventually surrounded by the police and run out of the tournament, and both of them wound up forfeiting the match. So yeah, neither of them win that match, and they kind of get lost in the next tournament. At which point the tournament takes a bit of a goes for a break, because now they've gotten through all the major tournament brackets. There were some seeded characters in there, and I'll get to that in a minute. There were some seeded brackets where there was no opponent, and they just kind of went on. And I will get to that moment. Also I should mention that there is actually another match in there where Amy and Bokun actually fight. Bokun, although Amy is a little bit annoyed, it's not really a fight. Amy is kind of just annoyed that Bokun is there, and Bokun starts crying because he thinks Amy doesn't like him. Which Amy then tries to backpedal on and tries to point out that she doesn't really that she's just feeling a little bit nervous, and that had nothing to do with her. But Bokun calls her out on her shit, which causes her to pull out her hammer and chase Bokun off, and she wins her match. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, she winds up winning her bracket because of that. But it does go on a half milestone, on a half break, where everybody who has won a tournament up to this point is still in the tournament. Knuckles is obviously taking autographs because apparently that's where his character is at right now. Obviously he doesn't really like. I mentioned earlier that the president and all the other characters just kind of guilt tripped him, but the way they did that again by playing into his ego is that apparently he has a lot of fans and he's signing autographs instead of fighting because his tournament match isn't for a while. But in case it then goes to cuts to Chris and Sonic, who are currently in the waiting room waiting for their respective matches. And Sonic is understandably a little annoyed at Chris for kind of sort of cheating, and Chris admits that he knows it was wrong, but he also points out that he's always the good kid and wanted to see what it was like for a change, but points out that it didn't feel very good, so Sonic accepts that as an apology and tells him to never do it again. At which way it then gets to the next match where Chris is now in the semifinals. And Danny shows no hard feelings over basically being cheated at in his match and wishes Chris good luck, pointing out that he'll need it. Case in point, Nelson Thorndike shows up in a chopper and jumps out with a parachute and lands in the middle of the match, telling Chris that he'll have to beat his old man if he wants to actually move forward into the semifinals. And off on the side of the arena, Chuck actually points out that he taught Nelson everything he knows and that Chris is going to need his all to actually beat Nelson. But as it turns out, as Chuck later admits, apparently talent skips a generation because Chris is able to beat his dad single-handedly. We don't actually see the match. It's just setup, punchline, execution. There is no match. Nelson just loses almost immediately. But in case, we then have the match against Sam Speed, and Mr. Stewart, and Sam is easily able to pin down Mr. Stewart, but loses his match because he doesn't wait for the bell. He doesn't wait for the bell to actually start the tournament to ring, so he winds up putting an illegal hold on Mr. Stewart and losing that way. But Sam isn't really too bent out of shape over the fact that he lost and points out that he had more things to do anyway, so he decides to leave. But in any case, it then cuts to Lucky, who was supposed to fight either Deco or Boko in his upcoming match, but since both of them were currently being chased by the police. Again, I referenced the Luigi wins by doing absolutely nothing, and once again, Lucky wins by doing absolutely nothing. He hit both of his opponents, but he gets to the finals simply by the fact that none of his opponents show up. And that's how he wins. It's probably one of the funniest bits. But then it cuts to Emerald and Ella, who are actually going into fight for their match. And Emerald is kind of conflicted on how to actually win against Ella, since Cream gave him explicit instructions to both win the match but be gentle with Ella so that he doesn't accidentally hurt her. And obviously he's a little confused as to how he's actually supposed to do that. Pointing out that he doesn't really know how to win. So Ella decides to just kind of forfeit the match and stating that she needs to make food anyway. So she just kind of forfeits the match. And also shortly before this, I'm kind of doing these a little bit out of order, but that's okay. Topaz and Mr. Tanaka are actually supposed to fight one another. And Topaz is more than willing to face off against Mr. Tanaka, but as we've established, Mr. Tanaka and Topaz kind of have a thing for one another. So Mr. Tanaka wins his match by giving her a beautiful necklace and professing his love for her, which works. So she's too head over heels in love with Mr. Tanaka to actually go in and fight. So Mr. Tanaka actually winds up winning the match by decision. But also, what else? Tails and Rouge actually face off as well. And it's quickly apparent that the two are kind of evenly matched because they can both fly. Rouge actually winds up beating Tails by kissing him on the cheek and then throwing him over the side of the mat, which causes him to become stunned out of ecstasy, and she wins that way, and then leaves to go reapply her makeup. But in case it then gets to a very interesting match where Amy and Sonic have to actually go in and fight, but neither of them want to. So obviously Amy is head over heels in love with Sonic, and that's been established. And Amy doesn't really want to hurt Sonic. And Sonic doesn't want to hurt her either, and has to find a way to get Amy to hate him so that he can actually maybe lose his match. But it doesn't really wind up mattering either way, because right at that exact moment, Dr. Eggman, who, if you guys remember, has been going around the background trying to find Deco and Boko, actually finds out that there's a tournament going on, sees that Sonic's match is currently going on, and decides to open fire on the tournament mat. And Sonic, after saving Amy from a rogue blast by Dr. Eggman, proceeds to go chase after him, which causes Amy to win her match, because Sonic technically forfeits. He leaves the arena to go fight Dr. Eggman, so Amy wins that way. But as of that match, we're now down to our final 8, which is Lucky, Emerl, Mr. Tanaka, Knuckles, who I didn't mention his tournament, but we do eventually figure out who the Black Knight is. So Knuckles gets into his fight during the second half of the tournament, and scares the Black Knight so much that he actually reveals his identity and reveals that he's actually Jerome Wise, who apparently joined the tournament because he wanted the Chaos Emerald so he could kind of pay off his massive debt. Because if you guys remember, he used to be the president's aide before Christina was given his job, and as a result of that, he kind of has no money. He's flat broke. He's unable to get a job, so he decided to join the tournament to win the Chaos Emerald, and he winds up losing his match. But in case, it winds up with the final 8 are Rouge, Knuckles, Emerl, Amy, Chris, who else? Mr. Tanaka, and then who else? I forget who else, but in any case, they're down to the final 8, so there's not only 8 people that are actually in the tournament. But the tournament does kind of come to a wrap in this episode, which means that now it's the second time in the tournament where now the quarterfinalists have to face off to actually win the tournament. But I should mention the tournament doesn't actually work. Kind of, sort of. It does lower Eggman in for a little bit, and they probably are able to catch Deco and Boko. But Dr. Eggman's still at large. He just kind of goes off and leaves. So yeah, the only reason Eggman's there at all is because he winds up finding out about the tournament by virtue of the fact that none of his assistants come back to actually help him. So he goes to go look for them and finds out there's a tournament, and then tries to ruin the tournament subsequently. So he doesn't really wind up participating in the tournament. He just kind of finds out because he happens to be in the area, and tries to fight Sonic, who is currently in the middle of his tournament match, and then Sonic goes to go catch him. So yeah, Dr. Eggman isn't really a participant in this fight at all. But that's how this episode ends. So in any case, that's my review of Sonic X. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks on my way saying thanks. So be sure to check those out in the description below as well. Also, if you want to help support me even further, be sure to go check out my Twitch. I stream every Sunday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, schedule permitting. I haven't streamed in a while, but I do plan to stream this coming Sunday. So be sure to follow me over there so you don't miss it. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So, if you want to try something new, or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But, regardless of whether or not you do any or all of those things, thank you guys so much for watching. As next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!